I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm a big fan of Studio Ghibli. You might be thinking, everyone knows them, why are you making a guide to their films? Well, if you've only watched Totoro and Spirited Away, oh man, you're missing out on so much. If you've ever wanted to know more about the beloved studio and their films, then here you are, a guide to Studio Ghibli from a big fan of it. Today, I'm going to be putting it simply to you. As always, timestamps are below if you want to skip to a specific section. I'm super excited to get into it today because Studio Ghibli films have been a core part of my childhood media. They're still media that I still love today. And that's the case for many others around the world, including maybe yourselves. They mean a lot to me. I'll try to do my best to do them justice in this guide. So, firstly, what even is Studio Ghibli? Well, Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation studio that was founded in 1985 by two directors, Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, along with producer Toshio Suzuki. They're based in Kogane, Tokyo, and they are, without any argument, one of the greatest film studios in history. And I don't think that's hyperbole either. The name comes from an Italian word, which refers to a hot Saharan wind. No, I'm not talking about studio. Idiot. Miyazaki himself picked it. He has had a lifelong obsession and curiosity about flight, wind and movement through air, and it basically shows up in everything he's ever personally made. But we're going to talk about the two later on. Since 1985, the studio has produced a body of work that is almost unmatched in terms of its consistency of quality, its visual ambition, and its emotional range. I think personally, their worst films are decent or passable objectively compared to other animated feature lengths and live-action films. Another important thing to mention is that they really do not rush the making of their films. They're not a production line like how most anime studios are perceived to be these days. Every frame of every Ghibli film is hand-drawn, even as the rest of the industry has adopted and moved to digital means, which is really rare and honestly very commendable. Because of that, there's a texture to their animation, as well as a weight and warmth to how things move, which is immediately recognizable and that no amount of digital replication has ever really captured properly. Before I get into proper recommendations, I do want to talk about the two directors whom I mentioned before, because understanding the difference between both of them changes how you approach the films. Hayao Miyazaki is probably the most famous. If someone who didn't know Ghibli too well was asked to associate one person to the studio, they would most likely say him. He directed Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, amongst a whole bunch of other films. Miyazaki films are generally, not always but generally, driven by a sense of wonder and forward motion. His protagonists are almost always young, often children, and they are almost always girls and women. Previously in the past, he's been asked about this, and his answer is essentially that he finds young female protagonists more interesting to write because they carry more emotional weight in the stories he wants to tell. His films are about growing up, about the relationship between humans and nature, about flight and freedom, and the cost of both. I find that to be a huge strength of Ghibli films in general. They have some of the best written female protagonists you'll encounter in media. There's also one thing that Miyazaki is incredibly good at, which no one else I think matches: his skills in regards to soft world building. Good world building in general should leave you with a feeling that the world you're watching has been fully lived in before you arrived and will keep going after you leave. Good soft world building should feel like this: things that exist in the worlds that you're watching are never explained, you never fully understand them, but they're never treated as a big problem. You kind of just accept them the way you accept things in childhood, where the world is huge and you only understand maybe a small fraction of it, and honestly, that small fraction is enough. This is what Miyazaki does so well in his world. They feel lived out, but they don't necessarily have a lot of complicated lore that they dump onto you. Isao Takahata is the other director, and Takahata is almost the opposite of Miyazaki in his approach, but he's just as important. Where Miyazaki is wonder and movement, Takahata is stillness and grief. His most well-known films are Grave of the Fireflies, Only Yesterday, and the tale of the Princess Kaguya. Takahata made films about the texture of ordinary human life and human connection. Other themes also include memory, regret, the passage of time, and what we lose as we get older. There's no fantasy in Grave of the Fireflies. There's barely any plot in Only Yesterday in the conventional sense. And his films ask you to sit with feelings rather than follow a story, and that's genuinely not what most people expect when they sit down to watch a film in general. He passed away in 2018, unfortunately, and his death affected Ghibli pretty hard. I don't think personally the studio has really been the same since. Now, some of you who are already into Ghibli and have watched most of this catalog will probably ask, what about Goro? What about Hayao Miyazaki's son? Yes, Goro, Hayao Miyazaki's son, has directed a couple films for Studio Ghibli. About 2 or so films, but they're arguably not as good as the films that his father made or Takahata made. I will mention his films later on, but a lot of people suspect the reasons why his films aren't as good is because of the pressure he faced during the production of those films, particularly from his dad. But we'll get to that later. So, finally, we can get to the recommendations. Where do you start with Studio Ghibli? Everyone, I feel, has already watched Totoro and or Spirited Away already, which is a great job. Good job, guys. Good job. Nice. You get a gold star. Maybe you've also likely seen something like Castle in the Sky, Princess Mononoke, Kiki's Delivery Service, or even Porco Rosso. There's a couple different ways to approach it. I mean, there is really no right way to get into anything. One way you can get into it is if you watch the films in chronological order of release. So that's from Nausicaä to The Boy and the Heron, which is not a bad way, but it's a little bit messy. Or you could get into it another way. You could start with either Totoro or Spirited Away if you haven't watched any Studio Ghibli whatsoever. I would say they're pretty exemplary of what Ghibli generally stands for and what they generally like making films about. Nearly all of the films are extremely accessible, but if you aren't familiar with anime at all, I think these 2 films in particular are great for you. If it means anything to you, Spirited Away won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film in 2003, and it holds the title for the 3rd highest grossing film in Japan ever, and it's only beaten by the 2 Demon Slayer Demon Slayer movies that came out in 2020 and 2025 respectively. After that, I'd really watch any of these 5 movies. Castle in the Sky is just pure adventure. A boy and a girl race across the sky to find the mythical floating castle before the wrong people do. I would really recommend it if you want some pure propulsive action and adventure with no fat on it whatsoever. Themes of the movie include wonder, adventure, and the idea that some things are probably better left unfound, like the weirdly stiff and almost brittle sock in your future son's clothes drawer. In Kiki's Delivery Service, a young witch moves to a new city alone and sets up a broomstick delivery service. This is a really cute premise, but it's really about what happens to your confidence and your abilities when you're on your own for the first time, and also what it's like experiencing adulthood for the first time. I'm honestly due for a rewatch at this point because the last time I saw it, I think I was maybe 9. I reckon I would have a very different understanding of it now that I'm in my 20s. Porco Rosso is about Marco, the titular World War I veteran pilot cursed to look like a pig, who's flying solo over the Adriatic, is that how you pronounce it? Whatever, in the 1930s. It is more lighthearted and comedic than other Ghibli films, but I've found it hits harder the older you are. Marco has seen enough of the world to stop believing in it, and doesn't know if there's anything worth rebuilding underneath all of that. It's a surprisingly personal and deep movie underneath the beautiful and adventurous facade of a highly stylized and romantically framed interwar Mediterranean setting. It might be the best looking Studio Ghibli film. This next film is maybe easily the greatest of all 5 in this sort of bracket. Maybe even the best of all the Studio Ghibli movies. Princess Mononoke, a hallmark film in the history of cinema and an undisputable contender for the title of the greatest film of all time. It covers a war between a mining town and the gods of the forest it's destroying, told through the eyes of a young warrior cursed by a demon who got caught in the middle of it. The central conflict is industrialization versus nature, and Miyazaki refuses to give either side a villain. It's a very morally gray film. There are no good guys or bad guys. and I like that because life is just like that. Nothing in reality is ever as simple as that's good or that's bad. And this monument of film and cinema history reflects that with its themes and characters. Everyone has a reason. Everyone's perspective is valid. Everyone is causing harm. And the film holds all of that simultaneously without flinching and does so confidently. On a more personal note, I have seen it at least 20 times, and I have been very fortunate to have seen it in IMAX. That was such a treat, and I honestly think that was one of the best cinema experiences I've ever had. It's pretty much by measure one of the greatest films ever made, and I'm really debating whether to make a whole separate video on it, because it definitely deserves more than a paragraph in this guide. But for now, just know that it belongs on the list, and that you should definitely watch it when you have the time and attention to actually give it. Please don't put it on in the background. It will not forgive you for that, and to be honest, I want either, gang. If you do that, I will literally find you
and kill you.
That's not just a promise.
That's a threat. Don't put it on in the background.
Thank you. Let me know down in the comments below if you want to see a full separate video on Princess Mononoke. The last one in this 5 is Howl's Moving Castle. It's about Sophie, a young hat maker who gets cursed by a witch and turned into an older woman, and her subsequent entanglement with the vain, dramatic, deeply lovable wizard Howl and his enormous walking castle. It's a bit messier than Mononoke in terms of plot, as well as Spirited Away, but it knows it. The plot itself is really not the point. What's actually happening is a film about self-worth, about how we see ourselves versus how others see us, excuse me, and about whether it's possible to love and be loved when you feel like you've become something lesser than what you were. I always see this debate online, particularly with girls. In the middle of the film, Hal has a meltdown because his hair turns the wrong color. So about halfway through the film, his hair changes color from blonde to black. And this debate that I mentioned earlier between girls happens to be about, does Hal look hotter with blonde hair or dark hair? I like both. Now, let's get into the next bracket of Studio Ghibli films. These are films that are a little less universally recommended as entry points, but they're absolutely worth your time once you've gotten your footing. Only Yesterday is a deeply, deeply strange but beautiful experience. It follows a 27-year-old woman who travels to the countryside to help with a harvest and spends the whole trip haunted and caught up with her own memories of her childhood. It cuts constantly between the present and the past, between who she is and who she was, and it's so honest about that specific feeling of looking back at your childhood self and not quite knowing how you got from there to here, or whether you've made the right choices, or whether the person you were at 10 had something figured out that you've since lost. It's one of my personal favorites. It's definitely in my top 3 Studio Ghibli films ever. Ponyo, on the other hand, will not destroy you. Ponyo is the cinematic equivalent of being handed a warm towel fresh out of the dryer. It's about a little goldfish who wants to be a human girl because she met a boy on the beach and decided she loved him. That's literally what the whole film was about. It's enormously and overwhelmingly cute, and it's maybe the purest distillation of the feeling of being 5 years old and believing completely and without question in magic. There's very, very little subtext if you're into that. Whisper the Heart is about a girl who keeps noticing the same name of a boy in the back of every library book she checks out. She then tracks down the boy it belongs to, and then has to reckon with what it means to be around someone who already knows what they want to be. It's a film about, I would say, the specific terror of being talented and young, and also not yet knowing if you're talented enough. Sitting down to actually make something for the first time and finding out the distance between what you can imagine and what you can actually produce. And discovering that distance is enormous and humbling. I would say it's probably the most quietly romantic film Ghibli has ever made. There aren't too many grand gestures. It's more so two people making each other better. And the scene where she reads her story out loud while he plays violin around it is honestly one of genuinely the most lovely scenes in the entire catalog. I would recommend this to people of all ages. You can watch it when you're young enough to still be figuring out what you want, or you can watch it when you're older, maybe from your 20s to your 40s, or maybe even older, to let it remind you of who you were and when you were. When Marnie Was There is a film that I don't think people talk about enough. It follows a withdrawn, deeply lonely girl named Anna who is sent to a quiet coastal town to recover from anxiety. She becomes obsessed with a mysterious old mansion and the strange ethereal girl she keeps meeting there named Marnie. She learns more and more about her and the people related to the mansion as the movie goes on. Thematically, it's all about memory, how places hold people even after they're gone, how we can feel the presence of someone we've never consciously known, and how completely devastating it is to love someone and then lose the ability to fully explain how or why. The film understands that we don't just remember people, we also remember the places we knew them. And sometimes the place outlasts everything else along with our memories of them. It's very quietly one of the most emotionally precise films Ghibli has ever made. Also, on a personal note, going off script, the soundtrack is phenomenal and it's one of the nicest folk albums I've ever listened to. And then you have The Wind Rises, which is absolute cinema. It's a fictionalized biography of Jiro Horikoshi, the engineer who designed the Japanese Zero fighter plane used in World War II. And it is Miyazaki, a lifelong pacifist, a man who has made his feelings about war very abundantly clear across his entire career, who makes a film in which he asks himself these things. What do you do when the thing you love, the thing you were genuinely gifted at, the thing that brings you the most joy in the world, is being used to kill people? Jiro just wants to build beautiful planes. That's genuinely all he wants. He's dreamed about it since childhood, and he's really good at it. Unfortunately though, those planes that he designs will go on to be instruments of enormous destruction and death. The film doesn't let him off the hook for that, but it doesn't condemn him either. It just holds him there and makes you sit with it. The film has other sentiments like how our talents are not inherently good, that beauty is not inherently innocent, and that the thing you make with your whole heart can still be used for something you never intended and would never condone. It is, in my opinion, one of the most mature things Miyazaki and the studio has ever put on screen. And I think it hits very differently depending on where you are in your own life and what you have made and what it has been used for. It has one of the most emotionally devastating endings of any Ghibli film, in my opinion, and it leaves such a long-lasting impression on you way after you have finished the film, partially due to Miyazaki's bad habit of not being able to write adequately paced resolutions to his films. The film just ends very abruptly with almost no resolution, and it just makes the ending feel all the more tragic. It makes you sit there with the loss that he has experienced and all the things that he did in the film. I won't spoil the ending, but the ending also makes you think about the connection of fairness and loss. Is it fair for someone who wasn't directly involved in your wrongdoings to die for your mistakes and your actions? And does someone's innocent life have to really be the cost for the things I've done? Especially if it's someone we love and cherish. Is it really worth it? Right. We're gonna move on to this next bracket. In this bracket, some films are amazing, and some of them are most of them are worth people's time, I would say, but note that mileage and enjoyment may vary greatly. Nausicaä technically predates Ghibli as a studio because it's a film that caused Ghibli to exist. Made in 1984, it's Miyazaki's thesis statement about nature versus industrialization in its rawest form. And Nausicaä herself might be the most purely good protagonist in their filmography. A spin-off of Whisper of the Heart, The Cat Returns is 75 minutes long. It's completely unpretentious and knows exactly what it is. With this film, you have more excuses and more leeway to actually turn your brain off and just simply enjoy what's being presented to you rather than having to think about it too much. This next film, Tales from Earthsea, is where we actually have to talk about Goro Miyazaki a little bit more. Goro is Hayao Miyazaki's son, and he is a director whose entire career exists in the shadow of a man who is arguably the greatest animator who has ever lived. I think their relationship was, by most accounts, genuinely strained and still is. Hayao was famously absent as a father who was completely consumed by his work. And when Goro was given the director's chair for this film, Hayao reportedly opposed it quite strongly. I think as you watch the film, you can feel that tension. It's quite uneven. There are real pacing problems, and Le Guin, the author of the original source material, wasn't too happy with the result. But I do think in the film there are moments of genuine beauty if you're patient. I would say go in with adjusted expectations. I personally don't like the film, but yeah, you might. I would still recommend you watch it. Already is small and quiet, and deliberately so. It's about being seen by someone for the first time, and it renders an ordinary house as an entire world worth exploring. It's definitely an interesting concept, and it's a cute film, but it's not one of my favorites per se. Up from Poppy Hill was also directed by Goro, and it has no magic or fantasy. It's about two teenagers in 1963 Yokohama trying to save an old clubhouse from demolition with the rest of their high school. The film, thematically and plot-wise, is a bit weird. There are pacing issues all over the place, and in my opinion, it also doesn't really have much of a backbone narratively. It just kind of feels like you're jumping around from place to place, and it doesn't feel like Goro has thought everything out. I would still recommend you watch it because there are some good moments in it, but just go into it knowing that it won't necessarily be good as other Ghibli films. What the hell? When the Edgar Allan Poe was happening outside my house. Do you hear those birds? Well, are those crows? Whatever. Pompoko is a deeply, specifically Japanese film in the way some Western audiences bounce off of. And I think that's worth knowing going in because the film can be quite weird, especially if you grew up in a Western environment and culture. It's got some funny moments, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of memeable moments, and a lot of scenes have been memed. Maybe you've seen them online if you're into anime. You've probably seen them on maybe your For You page. It's a film though that has a lot of charm, and it's an elegy for nature and folklore told through shape-shifting raccoon dogs. Cool film, would definitely highly recommend it, but it's not part of my top 3, unfortunately. The Tale of Princess Kaguya, oh actually now thinking about it, this film also might be a pretty good contender for the most beautiful looking Studio Ghibli film ever. Holy cow. It looks so different from other Studio Ghibli films, but in the best way possible. Some people say it's Isao Takahata's masterpiece and one of the greatest animated films ever made. Me personally, I'd say make your own mind up by watching it. I am personally more of a fan of his other films, but I can't deny that it's a great film, and I do understand the sentiments of the people who do say that this might be the best animated film ever. The Boy and the Heron is the most recent Studio Ghibli film. It came out in 2023, and it's Miyazaki coming out of retirement and making something explicitly personal about grief, legacy, and whether what you've built can survive you. Goro actually worked on the film as a producer, which I think, given everything, feels kind of like its own quiet resolution to something. It's quite strange and resistant to clean interpretation, and it earns really every bit of that, and it's probably Miyazaki's most personal film, but I would also say it's one that requires so much understanding and knowledge about Miyazaki's own personal life, so I would say it's much less accessible in my opinion. The film itself, though, is very pretty, and I would say there's a lot of eye candy for you to enjoy, even if you don't understand or know much about Miyazaki's personal life. If you're into Studio Ghibli, you've probably noticed that we haven't mentioned 2 films so far: Grave of the Fireflies and Ocean Wave. I'm really not going to say too much about either of these films, but I will say that please be cautious if you're planning to watch Grave of the Fireflies, especially if you're emotionally sensitive. If you are planning to watch it, I would genuinely recommend you block out a whole day for it. It's one of the most harrowing films ever made, and it's devastating. And then we have Ocean Waves. Don't watch it. It's like the worst Studio Ghibli film, and I'm not exaggerating, or this is not a bit. It's genuinely like the worst. On a more on a more serious note, though, at some point, I do want to make a Ghibli movie tier list, so I think I'll leave my thoughts for both of those films for that video once we get to that point. So now, at this point, you've probably watched all the Studio Ghibli films, and you're wondering, where do I go from here? Where can I have seconds? Where's my dessert? I want to keep eating. I think the most obvious next recommendation is The Red Turtle. It's a 2016 film that's a Ghibli co-production with a Belgian director, Michael Dudou-Le-Oui. There's no dialogue, and it's entirely made up of visual storytelling. It's stunning. If Ghibli's visual language resonated with you, that film I think is just a natural next step. Wolf Children by Mamoru Hosoda is frequently cited as the film that comes closest to the Ghibli spirit made outside of Ghibli. I think that's personally a very fair statement because it has the same quality of treating ordinary domestic life with extraordinary tenderness. It's one of the most bittersweet films I've ever seen, and the ending also completely crushed me. It's a beautiful film, and I would highly recommend you watch it. Please, don't put it on in the background either. It really demands your attention and time.
Don't put it on in the back.
The films of Makoto Shinkai, like Your Name, Weathering with You, and Suzume, are where a lot of people who love Ghibli end up, and they're gorgeous. I'll be a bit honest and frank. I find some of them a little more emotionally manipulative than Ghibli. They know exactly which buttons they're pressing, and they press them very deliberately. I think for most people, and honestly for me too, it's not a major criticism. It doesn't turn me off from them at all, but they probably don't have quite the same quality of restraint, and the themes are more obvious. They're presented a lot closer to surface level. Maybe I'll do a Shinkai guide in the future, but I will say I am not the biggest fan of some films like Weathering with You, Suzume, or Garden of the Words. Go watch the films if you want. Suzume in particular, I probably like the least, but I can't deny that it's visually stunning and beautiful. I would still go watch it if you're into that. Me personally, I don't think I'd ever watch it again really, but hey, a lot of people liked it. I am one of the I am a misnomer. I am an outlier in the very big sea of people who do enjoy it. So go watch it. And if you do want to go deeper into the craft and the people behind it, there's a documentary that was filmed inside of Ghibli during the production of The Wind Rises and the Tale of Princess Kaguya. It's called The Kingdom of Dreams Ad Madness. I would say it is an extraordinary documentation of that co-production. You get to watch Miyazaki and Takahata work separately in the same building, and the contrast between them as people and as artists is so fascinating and intriguing. So, that was a guide to Studio Ghibli. Everything here is just from my experience with it. If you have any films you think I slept on, or any recommendations for what you should watch after you watch all the Studio Ghibli films, please put them down in the comments below. I literally read all the comments. I mean, look at my subscriber count. Does my bum ass have anything better to do really when it comes to YouTube? Not really. I'm Johnny, and I hope today I was putting it simply to you. Thanks guys.